Right, so good evening. Those that haven't seen me before, my name's Paul Robbins and I'm an historian, presenter and author. And it's lovely to be back here tonight at the Astor and doing another talk for what I'm sure everybody agrees is the wonderful history project. So some of the talks that I've done so far, I've covered civil wars, world wars, great battles, Churchill, and hopefully identifying a famous serial killer. So I thought, what can I talk about tonight? So I thought, what would be a nice idea is try and lighten the mood. After all, it is the middle of February, it's cold and wet. I notice it particularly in the morning when I go out delivering the milk that it's still really cold and dark. So I thought I'd give you a talk tonight about great British eccentrics. And there are an awful lot of them.
Beaver Blues to Tango 3. Are you reading me? Beaver Blues to Tango 3. Come in. Over. Bearing Z 03524 on the port quarter.
Excuse me. Mr. Lacey, can I come in?
Bit of a crush. Yes, it's nice to have somebody here.
Thank you very much.
It's a very lonely life.
Where are we off to then?
Well, we're flying about 3 days after D-Day, shooting up ammunition trains and any German tanks we may see.
Are you really flying?
Yes.
I mean, you really are in one of these?
Yes, we are, yes. The fact that it looks as though we're watching television is only an illusion.
So there you go. We'll talk a little bit about Mr. Lacey later on. Can I have a bit more light round here? I'm sort of doing me Mr. Magoo impersonation. Can I have a little bit more light on my notes, please? That's better. Thanks, George. So then, eccentric people have always held a special fascination for me personally. I think it goes back to a party that I attended in the 1970s. Where I saw someone ironing a Pink Floyd LP as they were convinced this was the best way to get rid of the record jumping. But yeah, so to be honest, eccentricity is a subject that makes me really proud to be British. France may have the better wines, Germany produced the better cars, and the Americans of course have the best hot dogs and hamburgers. But no other country in the world can produce the quality and quantity of eccentrics that Britain has done over the past. And as the slide says there, if there was a world championship for it, we would win it every single year. So, if it wasn't for the odd people, some of whom I'm going to talk about tonight, where would this country be? I mean, if you think about it, what would we be? A bigger version of Switzerland? Worrying fool. So, what is undoubtedly true about eccentrics is that quite often, after a period of time, their views and ideas become accepted by society. Indeed, they become mainstream ideas. And another interesting thing that I've discovered in doing the research for this is that there is a definite link between being born into the British aristocracy or belonging to the ruling or upper classes and let's just say tactfully being sixpence short of a shilling. So, lords, viscounts, etc. feature quite heavily in this talk. In fact, I'm hoping to get government funding to do a final piece of research to prove why they're all lunatics, but there you are. Another group that features in my talk tonight is politicians, and they'll get thrashed as well tonight. Entertainment, they also have a few odd bods in there. And later on, I'm going to tell you a wonderful story about Robert Newton of Oliver Twist fame and Treasure Island fame. But you will still be pleased to know there's room left for some ordinary eccentrics, ordinary people, like Bruce Lacey, the guy you just saw in the aeroplane there, and others like the wonderful Gladys Elton, a particular favourite of mine. Gladys took it into her head in September 1960, when she was 81 years of age, to perform a striptease dance at the Hazelmere Home for the Elderly in Great Yarmouth. Tragically, and this is a true story, a male resident died of a heart attack shortly after Gladys' performance, and 5 more residents were treated for shock. And even more sadly is the fact that that's not the end of the story of the Hazelmere retirement home. The following year, there were more deaths at the home after one of the inmates, 87-year-old Harry Meadows, dressed up as the Grim Reaper and peered through the window at the other residents brandishing a sign. At that point, the council decided to close the home down. Anyway, so that's some ordinary eccentrics. Let's have a look at some of the great eccentrics who come from the aristocracy and upper classes. So, first on the bill tonight is Henry de la Poer Beresford. Now, Henry was the 3rd Marquis of Waterford, and he lived in the early 19th century. He was a notorious Anglo-Irish wild man, drunkard and scrapper, who enjoyed beating up night watchmen and playing sick jokes on people. And this again is a true story. He offered the London and Greenwich Railway Company £10,000 if they could arrange for a train crash so he could laugh at the victims. Known as the Mad Marquis, Beresford was known to do anything for a thrill. On one occasion, he took several large casks of gin and stood in London's Haymarket, handing out mugs of the stuff to random passers-by for free to see what would happen. Eventually, they all got so drunk that a riot broke out and Beresford had to be arrested for his own safety. Even more outrageous was Beresford's alleged conduct after being summoned before a magistrate after he rode a horse at high speed through a crowded street. And the story goes that he turned up at court on horseback and demanded his steed be questioned by the magistrate. After all, he explained, only he knows how fast he was going. The case seems to have been rapidly dismissed. In 1837, Henry was riding home from the horse races with some friends. They'd been drinking heavily, and when they arrived at a toll booth just outside the town of Melton Mowbray, the gatekeeper demanded payment up front. Instead of paying him, however, Henry proceeded to beat him up and, finding some red paint nearby, covered the gatekeeper and a police constable in red paint. They then proceeded into town and painted several houses and the pub red too. The police tried to stop them but were attacked themselves, and only after reinforcements were called were the mob stopped and put in cells overnight. Of course, Henry could laugh it off because he could afford to pay for the damage done. And ever since then, the expression paint the town red has been used as a term for having a wild night out. Now, he lived a while ago. This next gentleman, Lord Clancarty, he belonged to the House of Lords. He was also known as Brinsley Le Poer Trench. He lived from 1911 to 1995. He was the former editor of the world's leading UFO publication, Flying Saucer Review. Prior to inheriting his earldom in 1976, Clancarty had penned a series of books with titles such as The Sky People, explaining his unusual view that alien beings had merged through tunnels, including those at the North and South Pole, from a civilization that still existed beneath the Earth's crust. In 1964, he helped found a body called Contact International, which linked up ufologists from across the globe. Originally, he wanted to call the organisation the International Sky Scouts in order to appeal to children, but then they had to drop that idea after the real Boy Scouts threatened him with legal action. Clancarty was particularly popular in Japan, and in 1966 was invited there by a saucer cult named the Cosmic Brotherhood to take part in a ceremony on top of the Super Pyramid. Again, he was talking about aliens that had descended to Earth thousands of years ago, and the first thing they did allegedly was to teach people how to grow vegetables. Clancarty was particularly interested in the issue of UFO propulsion systems, And it said that an official from the Japanese car manufacturer Honda paid him a secret visit in London, asking him to be letting him onto the secret of what the aliens had told him. So if ever Honda make a affordable family saloon spaceship, you'll know where they got the information from. Now, Clancarty was definitely an eccentric. He was a member of the House of Lords. Now, was he an eccentric who was blessed with great knowledge? Here's the Lordship's interview with Terry Wogan discussing a supposed UFO cover-up. It's wonderful, but watch Wogan's face.
You find me scanning the skies, as indeed very many people have for very many years, at the Greenwich Observatory. The strange thing is that in all that time, not one of them has ever seen an unidentified flying object. Lord Clancarty is a leading expert in the field of UFOs and has certainly put the cat among the pigeons in the Ministry of Defence with his questions about unidentified flying objects.
The point is, there's been a cover-up, I think, in Russia, United States, and here, in August 1980, the year before last, when I gave a talk to New Scotland Yard about UFOs. And I happened to mention it. And at the end, hands went up. Doesn't the minister know we've investigated thousands of sightings? Well, my question was to ask Her Majesty's government how many UFOs, unidentified flying objects, had been collected by the Ministry of Defence during a 4-year period. The total for the 4 years came to 2,250.
But look, if they did land, wouldn't all the governments of the Earth rise up and send them back into space?
President Eisenhower was supposed to have met them in 1954. Eisenhower, with his own boys, met the extraterrestrials.
Really?
Yes, a very top-secret operation. They flew in 5 differently shaped craft to Edwards Air Force Base near Morocco. These extraterrestrials demonstrated their paranormal powers, which are normal to them. And they went invisible, visible, invisible, visible. Look what's happening, see? So, well, we can't have open contact with these chaps yet because there'd be panic amongst our people. So this was explained to them. I understand they spoke good English. Do you mind if we do an education program of the people on your planet? Eisenhower apparently said, as far as I'm concerned, I don't mind. Now, I happen to know someone called Sir John Whitmore, and he happened to tell me that he knew Steven Spielberg, who produced the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's your education program. But
Do you think that's being inspired from space?
Yes, Steven Spielberg told Sir John Whitmore he'd been inspired by extraterrestrials to make it.
Have they come from outside or inside our system?
Well, there are several theories. Of course, the most upheld one, of course, is the extraterrestrial one. Then, of course, there is a theory that the Earth is hollow and that there are some people inside it.
But these are advanced beings in the Earth itself.
Yeah.
Do they ever come out and have a look
Yeah.
at it? What would you say to people who say that you're bonkers?
Well, I can say that. I think everybody's entitled to their own view, and of course we're dealing with a subject which has not been officially accepted by the governments.
There you are. If you want to read his life story, it makes very interesting reading. So, going back a few years before Lord Clancarty, my next eccentric is John Mad Jack Middleton. He was a British eccentric and a member of the Regency clique. He was also briefly a Conservative Member of Parliament. Why his shirt's on fire, I'll come on to in a moment. He was born in 1796 into a fabulously wealthy family. They tried to send him to Harrow School, but there he apparently beat up his teachers and had to be brought home to be educated at home. When he grew up to become a massive drunk who enjoyed drinking between 6 and 8 bottles of port each day. He drank so much that on his death, one of his friends claimed that for the last 12 years of his life, he'd been permanently drunk. Jack came from a long line of aristocrats who were involved in politics. He wanted to get into the Houses of Parliament, so he secured a seat as a Tory MP by offering voters £10 each to vote for him. Once he was elected, he attended one 30-minute meeting in the House of Commons before getting bored and leaving and never returning again. It's calculated that it cost him the equivalent of £1 million today to get elected by the bribes. He loved shocking and frightening people. He would throw money around, gifting tens of thousands of pounds to complete strangers. His crazy ways extended to pushing himself to the limits. He would ride naked in snowy weather or perform stunts with his horse and carriage. 2 particular incidents, bizarre incidents, mark him out as an eccentric of some fame. One involved setting light to his nightshirt because he had hiccups and he wanted to get rid of it. It certainly worked. And the other, he turned up at his own dinner party dressed in full hunting gear and riding a wild bear called Nell, who had proceeded to bite one of his ears off. He was actually an avid hunter and he died in 1831, probably because of alcohol poisoning. Now, the next guy. We can all be proud of this man because he is an 18th century lord, an MP, and he's one of our own. This is Lord Rokesby. He came from Kent and he decided he would spend all of his life near or in the water. He spent hours in the sea off the Kent coast beaches and his servants often had to drag him away unconscious to dry land. As he grew older, his home, Mount Morris near Hythe, he had a huge tank built with a glass top filled with water. He spent most of the day floating in there. He grew the most enormous beard so that it hung down to his waist and it spread out on the surface of the water. All his meals were taken by the pool to the embarrassment of his family. His obsession with water was so great that he had drinking fountains installed over his home. The interesting thing is he lived to be 88, so maybe there was some sense behind all of that. Another one of my particular favourite eccentrics. This is Sir George Sidwell. He had many offspring, Edith the poet to name but one. He was an inventor of things that people thought were either useless or didn't work. And again, he was an MP at one particular time. As you approached Sir George's home, he had a sign near the door which said, "I must ask anyone entering the house never to contradict me or differ from me in any way, as it interferes with the function of my gastric juices and prevents me sleeping at night." He invented a small gun to shoot wasps and a musical toothbrush. He banned electricity from his household. He deliberately mislabelled his medication to stop anybody else using it. And he lived on a diet of exclusively roasted chicken. Now, we come on to some of my favourite characters, and this bit is subtitled "Where I Lose My Knighthood." We're looking at politicians, and I'm sure everybody can remember Lord David Such, the leader and founder of the Monster Raving Party. He actually stood for election at 39 elections, so he's in the Guinness Book of Record for that. He was very much a colourful character with his trademark lame top hat and leopard skin jacket. He remained a thorn in the side of the establishment for over 35 years till he committed suicide. But some of his policies, the right to vote at 18, the launch of local and commercial radio, all-day pub opening, passports for pets, knighthoods for the Beatles were later adopted. So, a lot of what he stood for. It's coming, George, your favourite bit. My next character. If anybody's over the age of 40, you may vaguely remember this guy. Anybody remember him? Yeah? Okay, in the early 1990s, there was a short-lived political party established in Britain called the Natural Law Party, whose leader was Sir Dr. Geoffrey Clements, the guy there. The Natural Law Party gained publicity by persuading ex-Beatle George Harrison to perform a fundraising contest. They spent nearly £1 million on 313 candidates, all of whom lost their deposits. As they fielded so many candidates, they could actually qualify for a party political broadcast. Now, the one you're going to see in a moment is from, I think, a European election in the 1990s. Enjoy.
There now follows a party election broadcast by the Natural Law Party.
Its fundamental need today in the field of government is to create integration in collective consciousness and dissolve the high levels of stress in society. Without this, problems will continue to multiply. No solutions will work. The Natural Law Party will make this area its first priority. We have a systematic and scientifically tested programme to create integration and coherence in the nation. The Natural Law Party will establish a group of 7,000 experts in transcendental meditation and yogic flying. When a person practices transcendental meditation and yogic flying, a high degree of integration is produced in brain activity. The person experiences bubbling bliss and stress is dissolved. This is the basis of many practical results in every area of life. Through a group of 7,000 experts in yogic flying, this effect of coherence radiates to the whole nation, bringing down stress and negativity in society and making the nation strong, dynamic and integrated. Over 500 scientific studies have been conducted on the benefits of the programs of the Natural Law Party. Of these, over 40 have shown the benefits of creating coherence through a group of yogic flyers. For example, in this country, a group of yogic flyers has reduced the crime rate in Merseyside by 60% during the last 7 years compared to all the other metropolitan areas in the United Kingdom.
There you are. So stop crime in Merseyside, jump off of mattresses. That's the first time I ever saw a party political podcast recorded in Benson's beds, but there you are. I think they've folded now. Anyway, okay, next one. Lieutenant Commander Bill Boakes, ex-naval man. He's a personal favourite eccentric of mine. He was obsessed with road safety. After he left the Navy, he needed a campaign, and his campaign was road safety. He stood numerous general and by-elections. In the Glasgow Hillhead by-election of 1982, he secured 5 votes, which is recorded as the lowest number of votes ever at a by-election. But the interesting thing is, to actually stand in the first place, he had to get 10 people to sign his nomination. So he didn't do very well. After his return from the Navy in 1945, he established an organisation and started canvassing for his Admiral organisation. And Admiral stood for the Association of Democratic Monarchists Independently Representing All Ladies Party, of which he was the chairman and only member. His idea was to cause such traffic chaos that citizens spontaneously gave up their cars and began travelling by bus or helicopter instead. Landing pads, for which he insisted be installed in every city. He would repeatedly hold up traffic, walking up and down zebra crossings, wheeling a pram full of bricks, or that particular box, or sitting in the middle of the A40 in a deck chair reading the Daily Telegraph. Sadly, he was killed in he died in 1986 as a result of injuries sustained in a traffic accident. He actually fell off a bus and banged his head. Dear Cynthia, now, Cynthia, you'll probably all remember her. She's an unlikely political figure. She came to national attention in 1978 when police raided her home while a sex party was in progress. Men paid with luncheon vouchers to dress up in lingerie and be spanked by young women. Police found 53 men at her residence in various levels of undress, and they included a member of the House of Lords, an MP, a number of solicitors and company directors, and several vicars of the Church of England. A cartoon in the press at the time showed a vicar in bed with a prostitute, confronted by a policeman. "I demand to see my solicitor," says the vicar, who is in the next bedroom. When the case came to trial in 1980, Payne was sentenced to 18 months in prison, reduced to a fine and 6 months on appeal. She served 4 months in Holloway Prison. And then again, sadly, in 1986, the police again raided Payne's home, this time after she was hosting a special party to celebrate the film that was made of her life. She was released from, or acquitted on that charge, but then she expressed an interest in becoming a Member of Parliament in order to change Britain's sex laws, which she followed through, and she actually stood in the Kensington by-election in July 1988 for the Pain and Pleasure Party. Now, I mentioned earlier a particular favourite of mine, and that is Robert Newton. You remember him from Long John Silver and the original Oliver Twist. He's best remembered for those roles, probably most so as for Long John Silver. What is less known about Robert Newton is that he was an accomplished Shakespearean actor. However, his hard drinking led to problems and eccentric behaviour. Whilst he was on tour in the 1930s and acting in Shakespeare's Richard II, he got drunk at lunchtime with another fine actor and heavy drinker called Wilfrid Lawson. In the nick of time, they remembered they were due to play in a matinee performance that afternoon, with Newton playing the part of John O'Gall. After a while, the audience had realised that Newton was drunk and grew uneasy, and the murmurs and the booing started. Newton turned to the audience and said, "If you think I'm pissed, wait till you see the Duke of York." Unsurprisingly, Newton died of cirrhosis of the liver at age 50 in 1956. Now, we go on to a real-life hero, war hero. You don't have to be an aristocrat or politician to be an eccentric, but it seems to have given you an advantage a lot of the time. But one person who came from a relatively ordinary background was Mad Jack Churchill. He was a British officer in the Second World War, and his weapon of choice was a Scottish broadsword, as he felt that any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed. Churchill also carried a longbow. He supposedly holds the record for the last person to kill someone in war using a bow and arrow, along with a set of bagpipes which he used to inspire his troops. He was captured by the Germans, and being a commando, the Germans originally believed he was a relation of Churchill and could be a useful bargaining tool. However, when his true identity was revealed, Hitler ordered that he be killed. Fortunately for Churchill, the Captain Hans Thormer, the German commander of the concentration camp where he was locked up with, disagreed with Hitler and disobeyed the order, saving Churchill's life. And at the end of the war, Churchill returned the favour by saving the captain's life by telling him that his life had been saved by this German officer. Now, you all saw the sad news yesterday, the death of a great Monty Python character, an actor. And it's fitting that I'd included the next guy in this. This was done a long while ago, so it's a fortunate or unfortunate coincidence. This is the real Basil Fawlty, a guy called Donald Sinclair, just in case you're confused. Donald Sinclair's on the left and John Cleese is on the right. If you thought that Basil Fawlty was the unique and original creation of John Cleese, then you're mistaken. Donald and his formidable wife Betty managed a hotel in Torquay. Cleese is said to have based the Basil Fawlty character on Sinclair after several of the Python team stayed at the hotel. According to Trixie, a waitress who was at the hotel, Cleese's Fawlty barely touched the level of rudeness Sinclair displayed to guests and his staff. They frequently had to lock him in a broom cupboard to stop fights breaking out, and if he entered the kitchen, staff were likely to resign on the spot. But what was particularly odd about Sinclair was whilst that anyone in the hotel, staying at the hotel, who worked at the hotel could insult the guests, only Sinclair could insult his own staff. On one occasion, Trixie was giving a couple who had checked in late a dirty look, whereupon they complained to Sinclair, who then proceeded to pick them up and throw them out of the door with a cry of, "How dare you criticise my staff?" On another occasion, Sinclair took Eric Idle's suitcase in the road and took his suitcase and threw it into the road, convinced it was a bomb. Sinclair, like Boakes, was a retired Royal Navy commander. Now, how do you end a talk about eccentrics? Well, I've talked about some rich, famous ones, etc., etc. But I found this lovely little clip on YouTube, and it's about a guy called Alexander Stuart Watley. And I'm not sure if it's still in the Guinness Book of Records, but he did actually hold the record of living in the smallest room that was recorded. It was a room that measured 5 foot by 4 foot by 3 foot with an extension for his feet. And he said it was small enough, he said, to keep women out. He paid no rent, rates or taxes and didn't believe in insurance, pensions or governments. As I said, he was in the Guinness Book of Records as living in the smallest room, but he hid behind his eccentric front the fact that he had actually served in the Battle of Jutland aboard the battleship HMS Abengour. He died at the age of 80 and he lived for at least 25 years in a box. Now, you will see Dave Allen's interview with him. If you listen towards the end, there's a wonderful lady who lets him live in the gardens of her house, and she explains all what being an eccentric is.
I see.
Oh, hello.
Good morning. I wonder, could you tell me, please, where Mr. Alexander Wortley lives, please?
Alexander? Oh, yes. His house is round the back. You can go either way, actually.
Fine. Thank you very much.
Not at all.
I'm looking for Mr. Alexander Wortley again.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. No, this is wrong.
There.
That's his house. The green one.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Mr. Alexander Wortley.
That's it, Stuart. Alexander Stuart Wortley.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Dave Allen.
Oh,
I've had a bit of a job finding you. I didn't realize you lived in a little house like this.
yes, try to live here.
How long have you been living in here?
Well, I should imagine 25 years.
25 years?
Yes. It was built by reals, some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Real, it's a real box. Yours is more or less a phantom box, you see, but this is a real one.
And have you always lived here?
Sydenham.
You've always lived here?
Oh no, I've been all round England. 3 times round England, I should imagine. The first box I had was built from the scrap of London. And I walked round all the counties of England with it.
And you lived in it?
Yes, the scrap of London.
How did you pull it, or did you have a pull?
Oh, I pull it. With the silly wife and pull it up. See the idea?
Yeah. How long have you been staying stationary?
Oh, I've been here 20 years, maybe. But I used to be at the convent before this,
Yeah.
next door at the presbytery.
Well, tell me, why did you give up travelling then?
Well, I mean, have you seen them? Got any wheels on it?
Yeah.
That's one reason why I gave over. But also, of course, I'm 74 years of age, which pulling boxes and things, it can get beyond you.
Now, you do your own cooking in here?
Yes.
All your own kit. You
yes.
sleep in here?
Yes.
Do you wash in here?
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Bathroom here, I do. You know, I have a rub down, what they call a rub down.
What about your bed? Where's your bed?
Well, there's this, of course, is the, it's really a bus, but the original bed I had for this box, it came from Oxford.
Yeah.
What they call it, it's Whitley.
No, it's not a very big bed. I mean, how do you lie down there?
Oh, I can't really lay down. I put an extension for the feet, as you see.
Can I see that?
Yes, yes,
And you put your feet in there, do you?
yes. I used to, originally. I just had one panel here. But one morning I woke up when I was in Banbury, and it was just getting broad daylight, and when I opened my eyes, I saw copper. It lifted this thing up, this panel, and of course, when you wake up, if you come into an acre on this earth, and you see a copper, it makes you wonder whether gives you a bit of a shock.
You have a philosophy in life.
Well, I don't call it philosophy, you know, there's too much of a loss in that. I like to be on the gaining side of things. My ideas of life is love, and every time I've contacted love on this planet, that's all right. That's all right with me. And I presume it's much the same thing with you. Only sometimes money and things like that get in between, which makes it more difficult. A sense of humour is the world's most valuable thing, but it comes from the fact that you've got a pure heart.
So indirectly,
And you've got a peace of mind, which goes to make it. I mean, all these comics and people like that, you must have a good blood system, or you get the dragon, and you wouldn't be able to see the funny side of things at all. It was really supposed to be the backside of a woman, you know, but it's a very serious thing if you judge it. There's one queer fellow that thinks he can kiss it. Anyway, it comes from America.
Oh, did you find him all right?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Does he actually live in that little house all by himself, or is he having me on?
No, he's always lived like that ever since we've known him.
What do your children think?
Well, they love him. I mean, he's so sweet with them. It's like having a sort of permanent grandfather.
And what do your own friends think?
One or two find him uncomfortable, and that's usually, because they can't put up with eccentricity in any way. They're much too conformist.
And do you feed him, or...?
No, he feeds himself.
He doesn't
Occasionally
have
we swap, things, like sort of pancake day or something. And he gives something to the dog, and he comes and has Christmas lunch with us.
That's very nice, actually.
He makes very good Yorkshire pudding.
There you are. So finally, I was surprised when I did some research on this. There is actually an eccentric club in London, and surprisingly, the president of the eccentric club is none other than His Royal Highness Prince Philip, and people like Henry Blofeld, etc., have carried on the tradition. So there you are. There are, in our history, wonderful eccentrics, people whose behaviour people will regard as odd, but maybe in 100 years' time, people will regard it as quite normal. And there you are, that's me. If anybody's got any questions, be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Hi folks, I hope you enjoyed the video. Finally, I'd like to say a huge thanks to all of the History Project sponsors. Without your continued support, none of the good work we do would even be possible. So thank you.